They know why they should listen to me. Tell people why they should listen to you every time. 3, the inside jokes. You know how I get. No, I don't know how you get. Please fully explain the reference, because that references another piece of content that I haven't seen because it's the first video I've seen from you. And if you tell an inside joke and someone doesn't understand the inside joke, guess where they are? On the outside. And guess where people don't want to be? On the outside. And guess where people spend money? On the inside. And number 4, going from acting like you're already friends to pretending everything goes to people who have no idea who you are. And when you make content so people who don't know you can enjoy it, more do. And for those of you who are worried, because I can already hear the thoughts that are coming up, so let me just address those right now. I see you. I'm going to lose retention if I introduce myself. Okay, well, let's play the equal opposite. Would you rather fewer people know who you are, or more people who have no clue? Because on one hand, we have some people who know you, and on the other hand, we have lots of people who also don't know you. So you're in the exact same position you were before. 2, well, aren't people going to get sick of this? You're going to keep saying your name every time, or keep introducing yourself? Well, from what I can tell, warm people like the reminders, and cold people need the introduction. And as a total side note, this is a fun little experiment for everyone here. You can run this when you leave here. Who here actually has posted content in the last year? Okay, good, okay. Good. For a second, I was like, this would have been really bad if no one had raised. Okay, fantastic. Okay. I want you to look at last year, and I want you to look at your number 1 piece of content. And this is what I want you to do. Just post it again. And then let me know how it does. And I will bet you that it does just as well or better than the stuff that you're posting right now. Let me tell you one reason why I believe that to be true. Because if you have been posting consistently, guess what's also happened? More people have entered your audience. And guess what they haven't seen? That amazing piece of content that everyone from last year said was the number 1 best thing you ever made. And you know what you said? New people, you don't get that. That was only for my old folks. My OGs, they only get that. No, you gotta reintroduce some of the stuff, your greatest hits. You gotta bring that stuff in so that the new people also know what your greatest hits are. So that the lore continues to compound and grow. So, number 3. And this one, or sub one. And this is one for me personally. I follow a bunch of quote accounts. I like comedy and philosophy and like fighting. There's like kind of categories that I follow, and gym equipment. And so I get quotes a lot on my newsfeed. But you know what happens when I see a quote from Sophocles or Epictetus yet again that reminds me that I should just toughen up and keep going? I like the reminder. I'm not like Epictetus, God, you lived 4,000 years ago. Like, get over yourself. No, he's not making new content, but guess what? People still post it.
I see the controller. 你可以看见 controller。我本来说我播不打，但是我那个我 login 我要得 Zapdos， 其实这游戏就是浪费时间啊。但是没有 Pokemon Go 那么上瘾。这个我其实我觉得我应该 Pokemon Go 我会有可能玩几个小时吧，但是这个我可能玩也是几个小时。
chose to think that despite selling more advertising space, it was worth having the same exact theme song and introduction for the show. Don't you think it might be worth that for us too? And here's an interesting thing, the last thing, positive associations in 6. If you actually get sing-songing about how you introduce yourself, or the things that you relate to you, it starts to become something that people expect, and then they start associating it with all the positive other experiences they had with you. So if I always introduce something a certain way, and then I deliver value afterwards, they associate the introduction with the value. And guess who else do they associate that with? You. And so, for those of you who are concerned, you can add variety to this. And I want to show you a cool little real-world example of this. So The Simpsons has the longest standing show, to my knowledge, that has existed on television. And the introduction is the same. Now, Bart would be like 70 by now, or whatever his actual age would be if it was actually human. But it isn't, right? And every introduction has Bart at some point in detention writing something on the board. For those of you who don't know The Simpsons, every one of the introductions actually changes. Every one of them. And so they still have the introduction that has all the positive associations with the funny times and the humor and the laughs that you've had with the show, but they introduce a tiny bit of variety into them to keep it interesting. And then what happens is people look forward to these introductions because they want to find the Easter egg. The real fans now get catered to, and the new fans don't know about it yet, but they will. And so now you actually serve both sides of the audience, the people who know you and the people who are just coming cold. And so that's it. Small variation, same introduction, you let the new people in, and you give something to the people who already know you. So, title it like they don't know you, introduce yourself, say why they should listen, prioritize the content that makes sense for strangers, deprioritizing the vlogs, the hot takes, the opinions, because if you can serve both audiences, serve both. Let the new people in, rather than have a wall they have to jump over. Let them in on the joke. Fully explain the references that you make all jokes, inside jokes for everyone. And then finally, mentally act as though you're always talking to a stranger, because if the content does well, you are.
And so that's the 6 big change that we're doubling down on. And so now that we covered those changes in my strategy, 他说像你要讲跟陌生人交流。
And it's not that other types of media or other topics or other formats don't work. Obviously, we had a smorgasbord. We had a huge variety, a cornucopia, myriad content types that we did over the last 40-ish months. And obviously, we had 7.8 million subscribers and 2 billion views during that time period in a niche audience of business, which is pretty good. And so it's not to say that other things don't work. I'd even say that my mess ups also work to a small degree. It's just that they didn't work as well as something else might have. And so the game, at least as I see it in entrepreneurship, is figuring out what's my biggest bang for buck, right? What's the content that gets me the most of everything? Because you only have limited resources. You have time, money, energy, you put it into your team, and that goes onto social media or the media that you market on, and then that has output. And so if you can become more efficient with the inputs you get more output on the other side. And so the question becomes, with the resources I have, how can I maximize the number of the right people who find out about my stuff? So this is something that I live by. Anything works better than nothing. So raise your hand right now if you haven't made a piece of content in 90 days. Okay, just do something. Because if you do something, you will do better than what you're currently doing. 2, some things work better than others. And 3, nothing works forever. And so the requirement of the entrepreneur is to start doing something, see what works better, and then do as much of that as they possibly can for as long as they can until it slows down, and then figure out what the next thing to do is. And then do as much as they can with that. So is that helpful in terms of understanding content and media? Awesome. Do you feel like you got at least one lesson without the scar, saved at least a tiny percentage of the $4 million that I spent learning what didn't work, so I can show you these 6 things that do? Okay, good. Would you like more stuff like this? Okay. Well, then I've got a bunch of free stuff that can give you to help you grow your brand and make some money. That'd be all right? Okay. So if you're just starting a business right now, raise your hand. Okay, this is for you. I'm the co-founder of the School Games. Inside, you'll find courses, full-day trainings, the easiest business model they know of. So use this media stuff. Because it's one thing to just say like, oh, great, I just watched this whole thing on media. Now what do I do? Well, this gives you somewhere to actually practice it. It's like a sandbox. You can learn it. And you learn by doing. This is one of the lowest stakes way to make money, get your first dollar across the finish line. And so fun fact, something I'm very proud of, is that right now 30.44% of people who finish their first month make their first dollar online by starting an online community. I think that's pretty cool. And so you can start that for free by going to school.com/games. All right. Tell them I sent you. So that's for everybody. Raise your hand if you're starting a business right now. Okay, that's for you. Now, if you're a little further along in your business journey, I've got free stuff for you too. All right, I'm trying to feel like Santa Claus today. I wrote these 2 books right now, which have 25,000 5-star reviews, and they sold 1 million+ copies. And I made courses for each of those books that are free on my site, acquisition.com/training. So if you like this stuff, you want to learn more about offers, learn more about advertising, more about getting leads, paid ads, content, all of that stuff, so that you can start making money within your business or scale it from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. I made this stuff for you. These are real courses. It's not barred anywhere. You click there, watch them all. All right. See, I put that for myself because this is how I roll. Get in the zone. So otherwise, you guys are all amazing. You can go there for stuff that will help you practice this stuff, actually do it in the real world. Because if you just walk away from here today and you do not execute anything, you learned nothing. And so for the love of God, just do one of the things so that you can get a tiny percent of that $4 million and the 35,000 pieces of content and the 1,000 hours that I spent recording. Just do one of them so you can take that lesson for you. Thank you, guys.
Now, building your personal brand can sometimes be overwhelming, so I want to help you cut through the noise and give you one more quick tactic that's helped me grow my audience.
I'm about to teach you a rarely used method that I use to grow my audience by 5 million people in under 24 months. And the crazy thing is 24 months ago, I had less than 10,000 followers, and I knew nothing about YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or any of these other platforms. And the reason that I was able to catapult to the top 1% creator in that 24-month period is using this method that, for some reason, no one really talks about. Whenever I enter a new space, whether it's trying to learn a new skill, a new platform, a new anything, I realize there's a massive amount of skill deficiency that I have to overcome as fast as humanly possible. And so I can either deploy time or I can deploy money to save myself time. So within the world of organic content, I was like, who can I pay to shortcut my path to getting to where they are? So on one hand, I could go to like celebrities, and I did go to some of them, and they would give me their strategies, but it was like very personalized and tailored to them, and I didn't think it would apply to like how I run acquisition.com in my daily life. On the other hand, there's like the coaches, gurus, etc. that I could go to, and I didn't want to do that because they might be using something that worked like 5 years ago, which honestly I see all the time. They're like, guys, you got to do hashtags on YouTube videos. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not true. And the third option, which I ultimately went with, are advertising agencies. And what an agency is just a business that sells services of advertising on your behalf. I can pay someone to run ads for me. I can pay someone to cut, edit, and distribute content on my behalf. So what I want to do is help you decide whether or not you should use an agency and avoid what I call the agency trap. There's different tiers of agencies. There's the guys who just just make stuff, and then there's the people who are real pros. Conceptually here, for one brand on one platform, a small one might cost $3-ish, maybe $5,000 a month. The more advanced ones are usually in the $15,000 to $30,000 a month. So it's significantly more money. So here's how I use agencies now and how you can too. Phase one is I get what I would consider a basic agency. So long before getting into YouTube, the first step I did was I hired a $3,000 to $5,000 a month agency, and they just got me to commit to doing 3 videos a week. They just trimmed it, which means you take out the oohs and ahs, put an intro and a thumbnail. The main objective of that first phase was just to get the basics down, forcing me to create content on a regular basis. Once I had more context, because I've spent 3-6 months working with them, seeing what the audience likes, then I'm like, okay, now I want to learn everything. So I go from beginner of learning the basics and doing the fundamentals to how do the top creators create on this platform. No business owner should change their business for one client. And so it makes sense for both me and the small agency, or for you and a small agency, to part ways at some point when your demands for what you want exceed their capacity. So then I work with the much better, more advanced agency who works with the top creators to learn all of the more new content. And this is what I want you to do. Just post it again. And then let me know how it does. And I will bet you that it does just as well or better quality for your goal and your audience. So this is a big thing that we noticed. The videos that we spent the most time on the front end, we spent less time on the back, and they did better. And so we want to spend more time before than after. And so this is my little quote. If you want to write something down, an ounce of pre-work is worth a pound of post. So that was my little take on this. And so by focusing more on what educates and what it means, we do great, and everything else distracts from that goal. And so those are the 5 things that we're changing tactically and that we're doubling down on to cater to business owners. This, at least for my audience, is what they cared about. And I happen to be in that audience, and I feel that way too, so I'm happy about it. So that's how we went from for us, as media people to a degree, because I've gotten into this now, to for you, or for your audience. And for me, that means for business owners. So now let's talk about why Dinero. All right, and this will also ruffle some feathers and rattle some cages. So instead of talking about relationships and college and food and lifestyle, I'm going to be narrowing down, or doubling down on, if you will, business models, business leverage, and selling in a business. Notice business being in all of these videos and all these topics. And so that's how I'm going narrow. Very simple. Now, I'm going to go back a slide because I want to hit on this for a second. Just like I said earlier, that people who like entertainment also just want more entertainment, what we also found is that people who, I'll go back real quick, people who watch relationship stuff want more relationship stuff. And as they should, that's what they clicked on. That's what they want. That makes sense. And people who want to learn about college are people trying to make a decision about college. Guess what those people probably aren't? Business owners. And people who want to learn about food, they watch other food videos. And people who want to learn about lifestyle probably watch other lifestyle videos. But for me, those were not necessarily the people that vibe the most with my stuff. And that makes sense because, to be fair, this is a little bit more foreign to me. When I talk about business, I feel very comfortable. When I talk about these things, I just give what I would consider hot takes. This is my perspective. So that is what we're doubling down on in terms of the topics that we're choosing for the content we make. So that's number 3. Let's go to number 4 in terms of the things we're doubling down on. So before this, we used to track views. This is another big one. Man, all 6 of these are big. Man, I'm glad I made a presentation about it. So before this, we used to track views as our primary metric. So I'll take a second here. Who uses, be honest. Everybody's like, likes don't, you can't trade likes for paying rent, you can't pay payroll with views. Sure, okay, got it. Who here actually tracks something besides views? Let me say it again. Who makes views the most important metric you track? All right, right, a lot of you. That's okay, me too. But I'm gonna give you a good metric that you can track. And this is after pouring through, believe me, I'm a big data guy. A metric that you might not expect. So the main reason is that I had a 6 to 12 month deal cycle. So I started by using views because I really had no other metric. Because for those of you who don't know what I do, well, I'll explain in a second. But we had no idea what it would do besides driving awareness, and I didn't really have any other objective, right? But in that time period of doing a deal in every 6 to 12 months, because we buy companies, that's more or less what we do, we began seeing a much closer correlation with faster feedback metrics. And ideally, in any business, you want as little latency between the metrics you track and the behavior you want to change. And so if you want to get people to change something, and you want to look at something that takes a year to get feedback, really tough to change behavior. But if you can have a metric that you can see daily changes or hourly changes, then those are things that are going to much more quickly change behavior, so that you can have 100 feedback loops in terms of changing and getting better than 1 every year. And so besides book sales, opt-ins, and applications, there was a metric that stood out as fastest and most measurable. It was ad revenue. And this is really surprising to me. So, and this is the point I want to make real quick, is that, to be clear, for those of you who don't know who I am, ad revenue is not how I make my money. Right, just very clearly. For those who don't know, my wife and I exited our first big company for $46.2 million in December 2021. You can Google it. American Pacific Group was the private equity firm. Jim Lunch proceeds after 2 of those companies. And since then, we invested in about a number of companies that have grown a lot and do over $200 million a year. So I do media to feed a lot of different things, but I don't directly monetize the media, and ad revenue is, I'll explain why in a second, is an important metric that we can use for everything else, okay? So these are companies that we own, great. So for me, I pretty much always ignored ad revenue and just saw it as something that could offset some of the cost of my media team. There was really nothing else. But I was wrong, it's actually so much more. So let's dive into a little bit for a second of like, how does ad revenue come to be? So it comes from two things. It's number of views times revenue per views. Now the actual term is RPMs, which is revenue per mille, which is French for 1,000, but it's number of views times the revenue that you get. Okay, per view, fantastic. So it takes into account, and this is why this is important, because we thought views, and that was the only metric we had, but we had to have something to counter it, because otherwise then you get views for view's sake. But we needed a quality metric with a quantity metric, which by the way, paired metrics, if you're ever tracking something for a department, having like number of tickets resolved with rating against the resolution of how well those customer service reps resolve, paired metrics allow you to get to the best or most effective throughput for any department. And I just didn't know enough about media to find out what our paired metric was. And this happens to be a single metric that pairs both. And so it takes account the quality of the audience, which for me was business owners who have amongst the highest spending power, and so RPMs are the highest. Now so for me, the RPMs go up, it means I'm getting more of the quality people that I want. And so this gave me and my team something that we could shoot for that balanced making videos for the right people who wanted to watch. So I mean, ideally, we absolutely want to crank views with the right people. And that's what that was able to track for us. And looking backwards, the month with the highest RPMs and ad revenue also created the most book sales, the most opt-ins, and the most business applications. And this had nothing to do with how many views we got. In fact, we did kind of an experiment lately where we did 90 days of almost no business stuff. We just did more edutainment and entertainment style content, and our views went through the roof, like way up, 2-3x what we're accustomed to. But even with the increase in views, our ad revenue dropped by half. So we're actually getting the wrong people. And I share this with you so you don't have to.
Real quick, I'm going to show you the exact 10-stage roadmap from 0 to 100 million plus that less than 1% of companies finish. I've now done multiple times. And so I can say with a lot of confidence that these are the stages as headcount increases that you need to get through. And I broke each of these down by 8 different functions of the business, what the conversion rate feels like what are the symptoms of it when you're going through it, and then what steps we actually took to graduate. We've done this across software, physical products, service businesses, brick and mortar, all of this, and it works. And it's my gift to you. It's absolutely free. And so the link's in the description, but you just go acquisition.com/roadmap, just enter your info, and it'll spit it right back to you, all free.
And so the nice thing about this from a team perspective, for those who do have larger teams and want to translate this over, is that my team now has real-time access to this. So they can see every single piece of content and the ad revenue that it generates, and they can quickly generate baselines in their mind of what's good and what's bad on an objective metric that really is good and bad, rather than just like, hey, this video cranked. Yeah, but it didn't bring any of the right people. We got this thing that had 10 million views, okay, but it drove nothing. Versus we had this video that had, 100,000 views, and it made more ad revenue than the one that had 10 million. And we saw the corresponding increase in the metrics that matter to us. And so that's why we switched from views being the metric that we're optimizing for to ad revenue, because it's a leading performance indicator. It happens almost in real time rather than something that happens in arrears, to go fancy word, later. So that's number 4 in terms of the things that we're doubling down on. So let's talk about the 5th one, shorts to longs. All right, this is yet another big one that's going to ruffle some feathers. So for a long time, the prevailing idea in content marketing was, again, a funnel. It's like everything's a funnel, all right? And it was believed that shorts viewers got more people to then watch longs, and then those long viewers would then translate into becoming customers, right? So people watch shorts, and then they watch longs, and they give you money, right? That was kind of the prevailing thought. But again, when we looked at the data, it looked more like this. Shorts viewers watch more shorts, and long viewers watch more longs, and customers buy more content. And so the point is that these are different audiences, and I will make a note here that this can change my platform. So I might be a long viewer on one platform and a shorts viewer on another. And where I do think the magic happens is where you can have shorts in one thing, and so someone finds you on TikTok, but then they are a longs viewer on YouTube, and then they watch your longs there. So I do think there's an element there, but not the way the narrative goes. And so for us, longs drive a lot more conversions than shorts. Conversions being book sales, opt-ins, applications, right? And business-related content, unsurprisingly, brings more business owners than not business-related content. And so we are going to double down on more longs about that stuff. And change our short strategy to keep the volume the same, but focus more on business overall. And again, people watch differently on different platforms. So making shorts in order for people to, on a different platform, watch longs still carries as far as we know. So despite the mega obsession with shorts that has kind of prevailed for the last few years because it was a new format of content, we're putting now more emphasis on longs overall. For now, as far as we have data. So that's number 5. Now let's talk about the 6th one that I'm going all in on. Assume more to assume nothing. All right, so what does this mean? So let's start with assume more and what that really means broken down. So assume more means I made content assuming people already knew me. Okay? So here's an example. The Alex Hormozi Guide to Haters. I might be like, if I don't know who Alex Hormozi is, or have never seen that face before, why do I care? If I see the day in the life of Alex Hormozi, yet again, I assume everyone knows me in this. I'm sharing these mistakes with you, as far as I'm concerned, for getting new people into my world. It wasn't made, I assumed, like everybody's gonna know me. The Alex Hormozi diet, everyone knows me. No, they're like, who is this guy? Right? And here's why this matters. If you want your content to bring people who don't know you, which is why many of you guys make content, then you can't assume they do. And so this is what this looks like tactically. From a headlines perspective, if I were to remake these today, I might try a first crack at business influencer crushes haters and shows how you can too. Okay. So now if I'm clicking, I would understand at least that this guy is a business influencer of some sort and he crushes haters. Okay, well, I might want to see haters get crushed. Day in the life of $200 million per year CEO. Okay, now the jet tells me that this Alex Hormozi from the first one before, Alex Hormozi may be rich or maybe he can afford a private jet, but now I know he's a CEO because I could be a rapper. I could be, more realistically, when I walk around the places that I live, all the people that in my community assume that I'm a football player. It's the number one thing I was like, so you play football, you're on the hockey team? And I say, no, I can, nope, nothing wrong with that, but no, that's not what I do. And then the third one there, Alex Hormozi diet, 16-hour workday, 6-pack diet for business owners, whatever. The point is that we actually make it welcoming to everyone. And so here's how we do this tactically within the content itself. So we go from they know me to introducing yourself every time. So earlier I was like, I'm Alex Hormozi, this is what I do, this is the subscribers I've gotten, whatever. We introduce ourselves. 2, they know why they should listen to me. Tell people why they should listen to you every time. 3, the inside jokes. You know how I get. No, I don't know how you get. Please fully explain the reference because that references another piece of content that I haven't seen because it's the first video I've seen from you. And if you tell an inside joke and someone doesn't understand the inside joke, guess where they are? On the outside. And guess where people don't want to be? On the outside. And guess where people spend money? On the inside. And number 4, going from acting like you're already friends to pretending everything goes to people who have no idea who you are. And when you make content so people who don't know you can enjoy it, more do. And for those of you who are worried, because I can already hear the thoughts that are coming up, so let me just address those right now. I see you. I'm going to lose retention if I introduce myself. Okay, well, let's play the equal opposite. Would you rather fewer people know who you are or more people who have no clue? Because on one hand, we have some people who know you, and on the other hand, we have lots of people who also don't know you. So you're in the exact same position you were before. 2, well, aren't people going to get sick of this? You're going to keep saying your name every time or keep introducing yourself? Well, from what I can tell, warm people like the reminders, and cold people need the introduction. And as a total side note, this is a fun little experiment for everyone here. You can run this when you leave here. Who here actually has posted content in the last year? Okay, good, okay. Good. For a second, I was like, this would have been really bad if no one had raised. Okay, fantastic. Okay. I want you to look at last year, and I want you to look at your number 1 piece of content. And this is what I want you to do. Just post it again. And then let me know how it does. And I will bet you that it does just as well or better than the stuff that you're posting right now. And let me tell you one reason why I believe that to be true. Because if you have been posting consistently, guess what's also happened? More people have entered your audience. And guess what they haven't seen? That amazing piece of content that everyone from last year said was the number 1 best thing you ever made. And you know what you said? New people, you don't get that. That was only for my old folks. My OGs, they only get that. No, you got to reintroduce some of the stuff, your greatest hits. You got to bring that stuff in so that the new people also know what your greatest hits are. So that the lore continues to compound and grow. So, number 3. And this one, or sub-point. And this is one for me personally. I follow a bunch of quote accounts. I like comedy and philosophy and like fighting. There's like kind of categories that I follow, and gym equipment. And so I get quotes a lot on my newsfeed. But you know what happens when I see a quote from Sophocles or Epictetus yet again that reminds me that I should just toughen up and keep going? I like the reminder. I'm not like Epictetus, God, you lived 4,000 years ago. Like, get over yourself. No, he's not making new content, but guess what? People still post it and people still read it because we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. At least I do. To give a little tactical one on this from mainstream, because this might resonate for some of the older people in the crowd. There's this thing called television. A while back, it used to be big. Anyways, instead of having it on your phone, it was like this big screen on a wall. It was a whole thing. Anyways, I won't get into it. It's like floppy disk. Regardless, floppy disk. Okay. Anyways, so there used to be this thing where at the beginning of every show there was a theme song, right? So they'd be like, "Cheers," where everybody knows your name, and there's always a little introduction. It says "produced by" and all that stuff. And if those shows that spend gazillions of dollars on testing chose to think that despite selling more advertising space, it was worth having the same exact theme song and introduction for the show, don't you think it might be worth that for us too? And here's an interesting thing, the last thing, positive associations in 6. If you actually get sing-songy about how you introduce yourself, or the things that you relate to you, it starts to become something that people expect, and then they start associating it with all the positive other experiences they had with you. So if I always introduce something a certain way, and then I deliver value afterwards, they associate the introduction with the value. And guess who else do they associate that with? You. And so, for those of you who are concerned, you can add variety to this. And I want to show you a cool little real-world example of this. So The Simpsons has the longest standing show, to my knowledge, that has existed on television. And the introduction is the same. Now, Bart would be like 70 by now, or whatever his actual age would be if it was actually him. But it isn't, right? And every introduction has Bart at some point in detention writing something on the board. For those of you who don't know The Simpsons, every one of the introductions actually changes. Every one of them. And so they still have the introduction that has all the positive associations with the funny times and the humor and the laughter you've had with the show, but they introduce a tiny bit of variety into them to keep it interesting. And then what happens is people look forward to these introductions because they want to find the Easter egg. The real fans now get catered to, and the new fans don't know about it yet, but they will. And so now you actually serve both sides of the audience, the people who know you and the people who are just coming cold. And so that's it. Small variation, same introduction, you let the new people in, and you give something to the people who already know you. So, title it like they don't know you, introduce yourself, say why they should listen, prioritize the content that makes sense for strangers, deprioritizing the vlogs, the hot takes, the opinions, because if you can serve both audiences, serve both. Let the new people in, rather than have a wall they have to jump over. Let them in on the joke. Fully explain the references that you make all jokes inside jokes for everyone. And then finally, mentally act as though you're always talking to a stranger, because if the content does well, you are. At least, that's what I'm going to be doing. And so that's the 6-fix change that we're doubling down on. And so now that we covered those changes in my strategy, I just want to get real for a second. Everything has a cost. And it's not that other types of media or other topics or other formats don't work. Obviously, we had a smorgasbord. We had a huge variety, a cornucopia, myriad content types that we did over the last 40-ish months. And obviously, we had 7.8 million subscribers and 2 billion views during that time period in a niche audience of business owners, which is pretty good. And so it's not to say that other things don't work. I'd even say that my mess-ups also work to a small degree. It's just that they didn't work as well as something else might have. And so the game, at least as I see it in entrepreneurship, is figuring out what's my biggest bang for buck, right? What's the content that gets me the most of everything? Because you only have limited resources. You have time, money, energy, you put it into your team, and that goes onto social media or the media that you market on, and then that has output. And so if you can become more efficient with the inputs you get more output on the other side. And so the question becomes, with the resources I have, how can I maximize the number of the right people who find out about my stuff? And so this is something that I live by. Anything works better than nothing. So raise your hand right now if you haven't made a piece of content in 90 days. Okay, just do something. Because if you do something, you will do better than what you're currently doing. 2, some things work better than others. And 3, nothing works forever. And so the requirement of the entrepreneur is to start doing something, see what works better, and then do as much of that as they possibly can for as long as they can until it slows down, and then figure out what the next thing to do is. And then do as much as they can of that. So is that helpful in terms of understanding content and media? Yes. Awesome. Do you feel like you got at least one lesson without the scar, or saved at least a tiny percentage of the $4 million that I spent learning what didn't work, so I can show you these 6 things that do? Okay, good. Would you like more stuff like this? Okay. Well, then I've got a bunch of free stuff that can give you to help you grow your brand and make some money. That be all right? Okay. So if you're just starting a business right now, raise your hand. Okay, this is for you. I'm the co-founder of the School Games. Inside, you'll find courses, full-day trainings, the easiest business model they know of. So use this media stuff. Because it's one thing to just say like, oh, great, I just watched this whole thing on media. Now what do I do? Well, this gives you somewhere to actually practice it. It's like a sandbox. You can learn it. And you learn by doing. This is one of the lowest stakes way to make money, get your first dollar across the finish line. And so fun fact, something I'm very proud of, is that right now 30.44% of people who finish their first month make their first dollar online by starting an online community. I think that's pretty cool. And so you can start that for free by going to school.com/games. All right. Tell them I sent you. So that's for everybody. Raise your hand if you're starting a business right now. Okay, that's for you. Now, if you're a little further along in your business journey, I've got free stuff for you too. All right, trying to feel like Santa Claus today. I wrote these 2 books right now, which have 25,000 5-star reviews. And they sold 1 million+ copies. And I made courses for each of those books that are free on my site. You go to acquisition.com/training. So if you like this stuff, you want to learn more about offers, learn more about advertising, more about getting leads, paid ads, content, all of that stuff, so that you can start making money within your business or scale it from wherever you are to wherever you want to go. I've made this stuff for you. These are real courses. It's not barred anywhere. You can click there, watch them all. All right. See, I put that for myself because this is how I roll. Get in the zone. So otherwise, you guys are all amazing. You can go there for stuff that will help you practice this stuff, actually do it in the real world. Because if you just walk away from here today and you do not execute anything, you learned nothing. And so for the love of God, just do one of the things so that you can get a tiny percent of that $4 million and the 35,000 pieces of content and the 1,000 hours that I spent recording. Just do one of them so that you can take that lesson for you. Thank you, guys.
Now, building your personal brand can sometimes be overwhelming, so I want to help you cut through the noise and give you one more quick tactic that's helped me grow my audience. I'm about to teach you a rarely used method that I use to grow my audience by 5 million people in under 24 months. And the crazy thing is 24 months ago, I had less than 10,000 followers, and I knew nothing about YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or any of these other platforms. And the reason that I was able to catapult to a top 1% creator in that 24-month period is using this method that, for some reason, no one really talks about. Whenever I enter a new space, whether it's trying to learn a new skill, a new platform, a new anything, I realize there's a massive amount of skill deficiency that I have to overcome as fast as humanly possible. And so I can either deploy time or I can deploy money to save myself time. So within the world of organic content, I was like, who can I pay to shortcut my path to getting to where they are? So on one hand, I could go to like celebrities, and I did go to some of them, and they would give me their strategies, but it was like very personalized and tailored to them, and I didn't think it would apply to like how I run acquisition.com in my daily life. On the other hand, there was like the coaches, gurus, etc. that I could go to, and I didn't want to do that because they might be using something that worked like 5 years ago, which honestly I see all the time. They're like, guys, you've got to do hashtags on YouTube videos. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not true. And the third option, which I ultimately went with, are advertising agencies. And what an agency is just a business that sells services of advertising on your behalf. I can pay someone to run ads for me. I can pay someone to cut, edit, and distribute content on my behalf. So what I want to do is help you decide whether or not you should use an agency and avoid what I call the agency trap. There's different tiers of agencies. There's the guys who just make stuff, and then there's the people who are real pros. Contextually here, for one brand on one platform, a small one might cost $3-ish, maybe $5,000 a month. The more advanced ones are usually in the $15,000 to $30,000 a month. So it's significantly more money. So here's how I use agencies now and how you can too. Phase one is I get what I would consider a basic agency. So long from getting to YouTube, the first step I did was I hired a $3,000 to $5,000 a month agency, and they just got me to commit to doing 3 videos a week. They just trimmed it, which means you take out the oohs and ahs, put an intro and a thumbnail. The main objective of that first phase was just to get the basics down, forcing me to create content on a regular cadence. Once I had more context, because I've spent 3-6 months working with them, seeing what the audience likes, then I'm like, okay, now I want to learn everything. So I go from beginner of learning the basics and doing the fundamentals to how do the top creators create on this platform. No business owner should change their business for one client. And so it makes sense for both me and the small agency, or for you and a small agency, to part ways at some point when your demands for what you want exceed their capacity. So then I work with the much better, more advanced agency who works with the top creators to learn all of the more nuanced pieces of the platform. So rather than agree to their initial terms, which is basically pay us as long as humanly possible and we hope you pay until you die, this is exactly what I say. Gather round. I want to do what you do in my business, but I don't know how. I'd like to work with you for 6 months so I can learn how you do it. Plus, I'll pay extra for you to break down why you make the decisions you do and the steps you take to make them. Then, after I get a good idea of how it works, I'll start training my team on it. And once they can do it well enough, I'd like to change to a lower cost consulting agreement. This way, you can still help us if we run into problems. Are you opposed to this? When you start that way, I like it because you're starting with very clear intentions. And you're saying, hey, I'm going to commit to 6 months. This is what I want from you. And I'm also saying I'm going to continue to pay you after the engagement's over for a much higher leverage, much more profitable consulting engagement. So that's what a lot of agencies would ultimately want. And if I need to pay a little bit more than the agency fee up front, then I'm willing to do that. I also understand that as I start to train my team on it internally, there will be a period of time where I'm paying both them and my team. So you're paying twice. The thing is that when you do that, you're actually building the enterprise value of your business and you're building the asset that you own rather than being reliant on somebody else who eventually could, if you wanted to, cut you off and then you'd be dead in the water. Or what more realistically happens is they gouge you and they continue to raise their price because they can see how much money you're making from the thing. With that new agency, we ran the same play. Hey, we want to learn from you. We want to understand why you're picking these things. We want to understand the decision-making process, etc. I start documenting what they're doing into our processes internally. We want to start co-creating. So they're making stuff for us, and we're making stuff for us. And eventually, our stuff for us starts to be as good and eventually better than the stuff that they make for us. And it should be, because I'm only one client of many to them, and I'm basically renting them as fractional labor with expertise at a premium. Once your team has the same amount of expertise or more, they should be better because one, they have more time because they're going to fully allocate their time to you, and secondly, because they will always have more context on your brand than an agent will. By having more time and more context, all we have to fill is the gap of expertise. And so once we have the expertise gap, then the in-house team should be better than the advanced team. And then at that point, you decouple and you let them go. So you want to make sure that you have a clear deadline for when you want to make that transition. And this is good for a couple reasons. One is because it sets expectations with them. They can also see the LTV and you can talk in terms of that. So let's say it's $6,000 a month. I'm committing to $36,000. All right, so like you're going to get that from me as long as you're not an idiot. But the real is that your team also knows that you're like, hey, we're 1 month down. We got to understand this stuff in 5 months. Hey, we're 2 months down. We got to understand this stuff in 4 months. And so it drives you towards the outcome of getting your team up to speed faster. Now, you have that deadline, but what if your team's not as good as theirs by the time the deadline comes? Well, in my opinion, you either need to change the people or they're not teaching you everything that needs to happen. Because if they're low-skilled people are doing better than your team, some who is a problem. Either them or you. Let's assume that the people are right and maybe it's just a more complex platform, whatever. I keep going until our team matches theirs. Once our team matches theirs, then I drop it off. We downgrade it to a consulting agreement just for insurance. 1 or 2 months later, if we feel like we're not learning anything on the calls that we have from a consulting perspective, we cut it. And we do so amicably because we set that as the expectation. That's how I grew my YouTube. So now let's approach the same concept but on a different platform. I didn't understand TikTok at all. I didn't use it. I wasn't on it. I actually had an agency reach out to me, outbound, which is not common for me to accept that. But they said, listen, you do no work. So from a value perspective, the offer was, you already have enough content out there. I can repurpose it and make shorts out of it. And I was like, okay, sure. If you want to do all the work and involve me at nothing and just make content for me, sounds good. And so that's what they did. And they started getting traction with the short videos. And we're like, okay, this stuff works. And then for me, my director of brand actually had a super deep history on short form content. And so normally I would have that second phase where I would go for that premium agency, but that individual worked at a premium agency. And so I actually bought the SOPs automatically, and we were able to massively scale our output on short content within 6 or so months of working with that original agency. And again, we're on good terms with the person in the agency. If you set the expectation up front, which is, I want to learn from you, and I want to be transparent about my intentions, and I want to eventually bring this in-house because it's my belief that my team will be able to allocate more time to my thing and understand my brand better, and if they have your skills, they will be able to do more output at higher quality than you could ever do. You have to make a margin. I don't. I'm going to cover cost and get 5 times more output. This is what I believe has married the best parts of agency and the best part of building an enterprise and making a valuable business, and avoided the agency traps that so many people fall into, myself included. So the first agency experience I ever had was actually really good. I then worked with like 10 more agencies, and all of them were terrible. And this is the exact process of what happened. So, reading directly from $100 million leads. Step 1, they got me excited about all the new leads they would bring. Step 2, I'd go through an onboarding process that felt valuable, and sometimes was. Step 3, they assigned their best senior rep to my account. Step 4, I saw some results. Step 5, they moved my senior rep to the newest customer. Step 6, a junior rep starts managing my account. My results suffer. Step 7, I complain. Step 8, the senior rep would come back once in a while to make me feel better. Step 9, the results still never got back to where they were before, and I'd eventually cancel. Step 10, I'd search for another agency and repeat the cycle of insanity. Step 11, for the zillionth time, start wondering why I wasn't getting results like the first time. So how do you decide if using an agency is right for you? First off, do you have more money or more time? If you don't have any money, then you gotta learn it, and it's gonna take time. And you know what? That's part of life. Usually you master one platform, you get some success, you get a little bit of cash flow, and then you can more quickly pay to learn the other ones. You pay down your ignorance steps faster. If you have the money, then for me, it's always worth paying down that debt. And that process is how we approach LinkedIn, how we approach podcasts, how we approach paid ads, all of them. I run the same playbook.
So when it comes to building a strong personal brand, you need to build influence, not just have views. So here's how to do that.
We got 32.7 million views on YouTube this month. Here's how. So I posted 35,000 pieces of content this year. We did a $100 million book launch for $100 million money models in 72 hours. So 3 days, we did over $100 million in sales. The issue that most people struggle with is that you're making not enough content, number one, and the types of content that you're making are not attracting the types of customers you want. The promise that I have for you today is that I will show you a framework that I have called SPCL, like special if you want, but it's how to build influence, rather than how to get as many views as possible or anything like that. All right, but it's a 4-part framework, and I want to break down each of the 4 components for you so that you can think about how you want to approach making content, all right, and building a brand in general. SPCL, these are letters, and hopefully overhead cam works all right. So SPCL. So what do these actually stand for? All right, so number 1 is status. And this is why you hear me talk about proof so much. But how do you define status from an operational perspective? For those of you who are new to the channel, I like to operationalize things, meaning like I like to look at objective reality and describe how you would see with your eyes, rather than try and put a whole bunch of like emotional words around stuff, because these are like that type of language is what confused me for a very long time when I was coming up. And it was only after I started defining things by what I could see, what I could observe, did reality feel like sharper, more crisp to me, and my ability to predict what was going to happen next increased by a lot. And so this is why I talk in this way. So how do I find status? So status is someone who controls reinforcers in a given environment. So that's a little bit fancy word, but fundamentally, if you control the good stuff that people want, then you will have status no matter what it is, right? And so the simplest example I have is like, if you go to a bar and it's a busy bar and there's a bartender and you have to get the bartender's attention in order to get a drink or booze, that guy in that moment has status. He controls a scarce resource, right? But if that guy walks out of the bar, no longer controlling that scarce resource, he does not have the same status or even close to it, right? Like outside of the bar, he's not getting tips every single 5 seconds when he like moves his hands a little bit and like says something nice. People aren't waving money at him as he walks in the street. Of course not. It's because he has status in one condition and he doesn't have another. Now what's interesting about all 4 of these elements I'm gonna break down, they all can work independently, but the idea is that you want all 4 to be stacked together. And this is what gives you the most influence, right? So like any of these 4 on their own would give you influence. Like that bartender, if he just has that, he would have some level of influence. And I'll give you a different example of this. If a kid inherits money, right, they're going to have status, right? Like if you have money, even if you didn't earn it, even if you didn't anything, if you have money, you will have some degree of status because you control something other people want, period. That's how it works, all right? But would that kid who has money have the same status as a kid who has money who also gave you, 10 different crypto coin pics that all popped off? right? Well, if he gave you 10 different picks and you followed them and they all popped off, how much more influence would that person have over them saying, hey, you should put money in this, or hey, you should, give me money for XYZ, or whatever it is. Obviously, I'm talking money because I'm a business person first, but like, think about how much more influence version 2 would have with just 2 of those things versus version 1. That's the difference. But if you have all 4, that's when you get Super Saiyan. So status is number 1, so you control scarce resources. Power is number 2. I would say if I had to only pick one, I would pick power, and I'll explain why. Power comes from something in the behavioral dynamics world called say-do correspondence. What that means is, if I say something and then you do it, and then a good thing occurs, a reinforcing event happens afterwards, you are more likely to comply with a following request, right? So, said differently, I give you the example of the guy who says, hey, here's 10 stock picks, you buy them, and then a good thing happens. The thing goes up. Great. So that person has status and power, which is why they are more influential than the trust fund kid who just has money. And so, to the same degree, for many of you, we're trying to make content. One, it's like, okay, status, I want to demonstrate that I control a scarce resource that some people might want, right? And so what makes this a little bit more muddied is that sometimes one event can check multiple boxes. And so I'll give you a simple example. When we launched the book, we did 100 million plus in sales. That in and of itself, me having money from the event gives me status. Me saying, hey, you can launch stuff in this way gives me credibility, right? Because I show that I have an event, I have something that has happened as a result of me doing it that gives me third-party credibility. There's something that you can observe with your eyes, right? The reason that my ads do well when I have my $10 million building behind me is like, oh, well, that's hard to fake, right? And so you have credibility there. And so one event, like selling a company, can give you money, it can give you credibility, and then if I give people directions on how they can do things that are similar, and then good things happen, then all of a sudden you get power. And then the last is likeness. I know I'm skipping around, but hey, we're having a good time. All right, and so credibility is number 3. And I'm going to go in more detail on all these. All right, and then likeness. So what's likeness? So likeness is that you see some people say relatability. This can be both psychological in terms of you share similar values with this person. You like their vibe, whatever you want to say, right? You like their behavior set, and that behavior set matches to people who have been positive in your life in the past, or they literally just look like you, right? So like Layla and I can talk about the exact same stuff, but she's a girl, and so she's going to have more chicks who follow her than me. And for the few ladies who do follow me, I appreciate you, I really do. But I have like an 89% male audience, and so maybe it's because of the topic. But I would think, at my onset, I think, oh, it's because I talk about money and I talk about business. That's why I have a more male audience. But Layla, I think, is like 54% female, and she talks about almost exclusively money and business. Obviously, she talked about some mindset stuff too. But I say this to say, okay, if we have these 4 things, and these are the things that create influence, and I would define influence as high likelihood of compliance with requests. So what does that mean? So if I say, hey, grab my new book, or I say, hey, come to this webinar, hey, I'm going live, like, come check it out, or hey, you should come to a workshop, whatever it is, right? You make some sort of solicitation. It could be like or subscribe. It doesn't matter. Like, there's levels of how big of an ask something is. If anybody's played like a video game, it's like you have like a role for like Dungeons and Dragons, and it like depends on how charismatic, how much influence you have, how high of a role, or how low of a role rather, you need in order to be successful with the request, right? And so if you want to stack that stat for you, then if you want to min-max your influence, if you will, then you want to stack all 4 of these things. Okay, you're like, okay, I think I'm following with this. So how does this relate to content? So first off, starting from the back, likeness, I think so much more of it is just be you. There's zero ROI in trying to be or act in a way that is different than who you are. It's a relatively trite message, but like most people are NPCs. Most people say pre-recorded scripts. They look at like the 4 different outfit, combinations that exist for different kind of mental stereotypes. It's like, oh yeah, guy who loves barbecue and craft beers. Oh yeah, that's that archetype. I'm just gonna be that archetype. Or you've got like hipster bro who likes hipster shit, right? Or you've got like just bro, right? You've got just like sure bro. And people, some will put me in that status, but I also like for a few years was wearing like sandals that looked like really weird. And I wore those, and that was not bro-y at all, but I wore them because they were super comfortable, and I didn't have to like wear socks, which is a big thing for me. Anyways, but the point is like, I think what makes you unique is if you actually lean into the nuances that make you you, and actually have a way to defend why you do what you do. Because most people don't even think about why they do what they do, and if you do things and you don't know why, it's because you're following someone else's directions for your life rather than your own. Real. And so much of us have been programmed by people earlier in our lives. And I say programmed as though we were like machines, but what person do you think in your life has super high max status, power, credibility, and likeness? Maxed out earlier on in your life. It's your parents, right? It's your parents. So think about all 4 of these elements. Status. Do your parents control scarce resources, things you want? They've got money, and they've got toys that they can buy you. They've got food. They control your shelter. Like they have huge amounts of status in your life because they control all the scarcest resources, all the things you want. These are not binaries. So don't think like, oh, I have status, I don't have status. It's to what degree do you have status, right? Like if somebody's got more money than you, they might have some status. If you've got $1, someone's got 10 grand, they got more status than you, right? But if someone's a billionaire, they have way more status than the guy who's 10,000, right? So again, think not in binaries, yes or no, but think in continuums. So the next one is, think about your parents. Power. How many reinforcement cycles do you assume that your parents had from the time you were born? When I say reinforcement cycles, it means like they said, do this, You did that thing, and then a good thing happened. Now, you might be like, I hate my dad, or hate my mom, or whatever your thing is. I don't really care. That doesn't matter for this purpose. The idea is that they probably said, don't go in the street, or don't do that, and you avoided a bad thing, or do this, and then a good thing happened, right? You tied your shoes the first time, you put the 2 bunny ears together, you tied your shoes, a good thing happened. You followed their directions. Think about how many times a parent has given you directions, you followed them, and a bad thing was avoided, or a good thing happened. Many. And so it makes sense that not only do they have a lot of status, they have a lot of power. What else do they have? Credibility. Now, this is one where I think parents sometimes might lack compared to the other things. If you have a parent who also has credibility in that specific, realm or whatever it is that they're talking about, then you have even more influence on you. And then finally, for parents, are they like you? Yeah, they literally look like you, right? And oftentimes, they share similar values to you, to a degree. Obviously, some people just go polar opposite from their parents. That's fine, but I'm talking in sweeping generalities for most people. This should at least explain or break down, why do parents have so much power over us? How do they have so much influence over our behaviors? You might not even want to listen to your parents. You might even like your parents, but you can still feel that you have to resist their requests because you are so programmed based on these elements of behavior to comply with their requests, right? And so then the idea is, how do we take these 4 elements and then how do we reverse engineer these into the content that we have so that we can build up true influence? And again, we're defining influence as the likelihood of compliance with the request, right? And that likelihood will depend on the nature of the request and how much your SPCL is in relation to that thing, right? If I was giving out fashion tips, I probably don't have a lot of credibility for fashion tips, right? I don't know if I control any scarce resources around fashion. I have no fashion hookups. I probably haven't given anyone specific fashion tips. I have no third-party anything for credibility for it, and you probably don't look like me. And so I probably would have very low influence. To some degree, they can generalize as you go up and up and up, but you have more influence in domain specificity. If we know these are the 4 things, status, power, credibility, likeness, then for each of these things in our videos, right, we want to demonstrate that we control scarce resources. And so for me, at the very beginning, if you think about what the intro was, right, so I said we did 32.7 million views, and we did over 5 point something million dollars in sales for the book launch in 72 hours. And so that's me demonstrating status. I have these things, right? Then power. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to break down 4 things you can follow, and if you follow these things, you're going to be more likely to get people who are going to comply with your future requests. And so that means that they're not just going to watch your video, but they're going to be more likely to, 1, watch the next video, and if you have any kind of call to action in the video, whatever level of call to action that is for you, whether it's subscribe or like or share or buy something that's small or set up a call or whatever it is that you sell, then this is going to be second, right? You'll have included that in your content. So then credibility is going to be the third party stuff. So the reason that I had at my launch, for example, I had Guinness. I had to pay those judges to be on site was because I wanted to validate that the books that we did and the revenue that we generated was legit, right? So I had a third party that most people respect as a legitimate corporation, that their entire business is based on trust, that they validate and verify proof that these records are broken. And so that gives credibility. The likeness piece, like I said earlier, is just you being you, right? And so that's why I'm actually super pumped to do these live streams, because this is I honestly hate making YouTube videos. What I mean that is staring at a camera and having prompts to solicit me to say stuff. I will do it because I have a relatively high pain tolerance and I'll do what is required to get what I want. But I'm going all in this. So if you guys are what's Alex's kind of media strategy for the future? I'm focusing on 2 words. You can write this down: live, interactive. Those are the 2 things that is describing the ACQ 3.0 or Mozy Media 3.0 vision for what's going forward. That is what I'm focusing on. And I'll tell you a story of why I think this is so interesting. So I had a conversation with a big influencer. I don't think you would mind. With Mr. Beast a few weeks ago, and we were talking about kind of the future of media and content. One of the things that he was talking about was the soccer game that came up, that they do UK versus US. What ends up happening is that they have all these different celebrities or influencers from different platforms, right? And so starting from the lowest people on this little totem pole, they would walk out in the stadium, and this became the kind of the de facto measuring stick for who had the most cool points, right? These are the A-listers. And so this is your typical kind of celebs from movies and 90s and the 2000s or whatever, right? People they recognize because they're celebs, but they don't have huge, I guess they have some media presence, but it's more traditional media. The level of applause for these guys was almost nothing. Barely anyone cared. So then the next level that came up was the shorts creators. So this is your only TikTokers or people who only make reels, but only short videos. And so they had a little bit more applause on the applausometer compared to the A-listers. Then the long form guys came out. And this is when the audience got way rowdier. All right, so this is your podcasters, your YouTubers, the people who make long form pieces of content. And I'm gonna pause here for a second to kind of highlight why I think this is. I don't think there's anything wrong with shorts. We make tons of shorts. But I see the purpose of shorts as many times a way to get someone to watch along, right? They watch a couple shorts and then think, okay, this guy seems legit, or this gal seems legit. I'm gonna risk my time, because that's the risk. They're making an investment, right? You're making an investment today. I'm gonna risk them to get a good return on this, right? And so shorts then lead to long. But let me show you the difference from an influence perspective. How many reinforcing cycles do you think you can have in 30 seconds compared to 2 hours. It's like not even close. And so if someone watched 2 1-hour pieces of content from me, period, okay, 2 1-hour pieces, it's 120 minutes. For me to get that same level of exposure and kind of cycles of reinforcing with a prospect, and they were only consuming shorts, right? Let's say my average short, let's say it's 15 seconds. So that means it's 4 shorts per minute. So if I have 120 minutes for longs, someone would have to watch 480 shorts to have the same level of exposure as watching 2 hours with me. And think about how important this is. What were the things that people said, like this was the quote podcast election? Trump went on, and I don't care about the politics behind it, but I do care about influence and persuasion. And so like, why is it that the 2 podcasts that I think really nudged this election, my opinion, is the Trump 3-hour plus podcast that he did with Rogan like a week or whatever it was. I think that was a huge influential event. I think Elon getting on Tucker Carlson and doing that interview. I think those 2 interviews were some of the interviews that really nudged the election. And again, I don't care who you voted for. It doesn't matter to me. I think about this from marketing persuasion, okay? And so because of that, audiences who were not sure got to spend 3 hours with a presidential candidate, and as a result, it just nudged some of them in the direction to ultimately vote, okay? Now, back to our little story. A-listers have almost no applause. Shorts have slight applause. Longs have legit applause. Then, the live streamers. When the live streamers came out, it was like the entire auditorium or stadium or arena erupted. And when I heard that, it was such a visual example of, I mean, we have this saying, which is like butts and seats. If you just make a bunch of like meme content, right, you demonstrate almost none of these things. Some of you guys are chasing views when what I think you want is you want to have prospects who are more likely to comply with a future request. And so we need to change our behavior to maximize the likelihood that occurs. And so in looking at this thing, this is why I'm telling you, like, showing my cards, I'm going to be doing more live streams. And I think it's also, and this is me like outside of SPCL, but I think like meta themes overall, I think that the internet will always move towards truth. And so I think the A-listers, everything's super curated, everything's super polished, it's photoshopped, it's scripted. And as you move closer this way, it's rawer. Like you have a 3-hour podcast, like they're not scripted, right? Or most of them aren't, right? Streaming, it's like, yeah, we're live, right? I can't do anything, like we're live. This idea of how can we approximate the rawest reality of us hanging out, right? And actually going through this stuff, I think that is what will unlock the most influence, as long as you are still including these SPCL elements into it. And I think that's the marriage. Do SPCL and do it as many times as I possibly can. That's the idea. And so live streaming provides that opportunity. Let's also think about this from the context of volume. Whether you like him or not, Rogan, tremendous influence, right? To the same degree, PBD, tremendous influence. Dave Ramsey, tremendous influence. What is it that these guys have in common? They're putting out hours of content every single day. So I said earlier that we have 35,000 pieces of content, right? I hear plenty of times, there's tons of $1 million businesses, $2 million businesses, things like that. They put out 1 piece of content a day, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's 365 pieces of content a year. And if you think about the size of acquisition.com in terms of our revenue, right, compared to somebody who's doing $1 or $2 million a year, and they're doing 365 pieces of content, we're just quite literally doing 100 times. And as a result of that 100 times the volume, what do you think's happening? We get 100 times the prospects. And so people want to outsmart themselves and think they can like not do the work that's required, but it's actually far more linear than you expect. So like we just know that like 1 out of 10 shorts is gonna go is gonna be a 2 or 3x outlier. We just know what that math is like.
那屁股一点的，哇，这个人为什么有生撇的头发？
And as long as I'm checking these boxes, like I'm making the
他
right
这个能换生撇的头
you're
发。
going to get the right kind of prospects. So I'll give you one more nugget, like I said, which is that some of you guys may have heard this, and it's a concept of social media is now turning into interest media. Okay, so what does this mean? Let's unpack this for a second. If you make content and you judge it by views, I think that's dumb, and I'll explain why. If I have a grandma public come and just do a running slap and just slaps me across the face, that video will probably get views. But does it get the grandma views? No. Does it get me any more people who now believe more in my stuff? No. But what it will do is it will show it to people who are interested in humor, which is a lot of people, right? But those might not be your customers, and they probably aren't. So, assuming you're not an entertainer and you are somebody who's a business person, if you sell services to anyone, you're likely going to be an educator, not an entertainer. Meaning you're trying to provide value to people to change their behavior in some way, and ideally change their behavior that gets them to walk closer to you and buy stuff. Okay? So, what do I mean by social versus interest? If you want to attract the right avatar, make content for that avatar. That sounds so obvious and simple, and the thing is that no one does it, because here's the writer downer. The content is the targeting. The algorithm is so good now. It knows what you're talking about. It knows it can literally judge your background. It judges what you're wearing. It judges who you are. It will display it to people that they know have a history of watching content that is similar to that. And so if you're making stuff about how to fix pianos because you're a piano repair guy, then you will find people who are trying to fix their pianos. But if you're making that type of content, you might be like, man, I'm only getting 1,000 views a video. It's like, yeah, but the market of people who are buying pianos might be significantly smaller than the market of people who just want to be entertained or distracted. See, it's not fair to compare your views against Mr. Beast. It doesn't make any sense. If I were to think to myself, like, I have a room of 1,000 people that are going to watch this, and all of them are only interested in fixing pianos, That's a hell of an opportunity. I care so much more about IRL responses. So what do I mean by that? If I make a video and then I get texts from business owners that I like and that I respect being like, yo, that was fire, then I'm like, okay, I'm on the right track. And so some of you guys, let me know in the comments you guys have seen a format that we talked about. We call it cash cows, but basically it's me. There's a business owner that presents a little bit about their business. They come to this side and we talk about how to improve their business, right? So let me know in the comments if you like that style, and if you do, let me know if you're a business owner or not. Okay, so I like that style and I'm not a business owner. I like that style and I am a business owner, or I don't like that style and I'm a business owner,
funny,
or I don't like that style and I'm not a business owner. If you are a business owner, when I have people who are here in person, IRL, in real life, in Vegas, right? Business owners who fly out, I say, what is your favorite type of content? Dollars to donuts, that's their favorite type of content. And so I make more of that, even though, and it would make sense. Like, it would make sense that there's fewer of those people, right? Just think about math. If you've got the whole population here, I'll show you a little graph on this. So let's say that 100% of people, like this represents 100%, let's just use USA because I already know the numbers for USA, okay? So let's say this is 100%, all right? You get 100% of people who are interested. Okay, well, right now only 9% of people even own a business. Like 9%. So right off the bat, I'm going to have a huge percentage of people that aren't my ideal audience. Now, of course, I do have people who are business interested, and that's why I'm a co-founder of School, and we give people, a way to go start a business online in a low-cost way, right? Which you can do. It's $9 a month after a 14-day trial. You can check it out. And there's a bunch of training and community and all that kind of stuff. All right, but you can go to school.com, I think /Hormozi. I think it's below this video. Doesn't matter. Point being, 9% is what I'm competing for. Okay. Now that means that there's about 32 to 33 million business owners in the U.S. Okay, 32 million. That's 100% of all business owners. Now, within that, 95% of that 9% is below $1 million in revenue. 95%. Then I've got 5% of that 9% that are over $1 million. Now, if you want to get weird with it, what percent do you think is over 10 million? 0.4%. 1 in 250. And then 100 million, 9 figures, is I think 1 in roughly 3,000, depending on your data source. 1 in 3,000 businesses gets to 100 million a year. This big. And so it would make sense then that we've given these numbers, right? 9% is 32 million. So out of 5% of that is going to be 1.5 million people. There's only 1.5 million people who are business owners doing over $1 million, based on the math that this is Census Bureau data. Maybe theirs isn't correct, but that's the math, right? And so if we're looking at that's the market, then it would make sense that I'm not going to get all 100% of them to watch my video, right? If I got 1.5 million views and 100% of them were business owners, that'd be insane, right? And so it would make sense that if I get 100,000 views on a video that's really made for that level of business owner, then I'm crushing it, right? And it doesn't make sense to look at Mr. Beast's video with 100 million views and be like, oh man, I suck. It's like, dude, we're going after, we have different games, right? And so I'd encourage you to create accurate expectations of the size of the market that you're going after, and also think about the translation of these numbers into IRL. I have 2 businesses that I looked at in the last year that were doing over $1 million a year with less than 5,000 followers. You absolutely can make plenty of money with a very small following as long as you make content that's directly valuable for that following. All right, with that being said, we just went over SPCL, status, power, credibility, and likeness, what you would include in videos, why I'm going all in on live stream, and why the whole point is you want to get as much time with your prospects as humanly possible. You want to make the topics of your content based on the things that those people find interesting, not based on being social, but being interesting. If you make it interesting for them, they will keep watching it. And then being realistic about your expectations on how many views you can get based on your size of market.
So you've built a personal brand. Here's how I would monetize an audience to make more money.
In my second company, Prestige Labs, I built up to over 5,000 affiliates that generated $20+ million a year in revenue, and that business continues to this day. In Allen, my software company, which is my third big company, we built up to over 1,000 affiliates that were agencies white labeling that software. For my book launch for $100 million leads, we got 30,000 affiliates who promoted the actual book launch. I've also invested in companies that I've personally endorsed. And so I bring all these things up because most people don't know how to, quote, monetize an audience. And after talking to a lot of creators or celebrities and influencers and also business owners who want to do deals with those people, a lot of people don't share a construct in terms of thinking through how to make those deals happen. And so I wanted to make this video to outline the 4 ways that I see those deals happening and the combinations between them and what considerations you might have, whether you're on the doing the deal side of having an audience or being the person who wants to, quote, buy, license, rent the audience from an influencer or somebody who has those eyeballs. All right, so 4 ways to monetize an audience. Let's use a good marker that doesn't suck. Step 1, have good markers. 4 ways to monetize an audience. All right, now, right off the bat, number 1, we've got affiliates, which is what I was saying earlier. The second way that you can monetize an audience is through sponsorships. Some people call these endorsements. The third way that you can do this is through partnerships, which usually involve equity. And the fourth way that we can do this they're starting your own if you're the influencer in this instance. All right, so we have affiliates, which is where you are getting paid after you make sales for a business. Sponsorships, where they pay you first to advertise on behalf of the business and typically endorse it via your brand. Partnerships, where you go into a business that already has a product, already has an infrastructure, and you do one of these two things or a combination of these two things for equity. And so the behaviors between affiliates, sponsorships, and partnerships are more or less the same. The difference is simply how you get compensated. And then the fourth is where you just start your entirely own brand to then promote to your audience. All right, so let's break down which of these and kind of where they sit on the continuum. And the reason I want to bring this up is because I'm having so many conversations with people who are like, I have this audience, I've built it for 4 years, I just don't know what to do. And so I think of these four on a continuum, all right? And I can think of this continuum in terms of difficulty and risk and value, all right? And so on this side, you've got the affiliates. This is the fastest way that you can immediately make money. Most businesses that have affiliate programs, you can sign up automatically. They have predetermined terms that are associated with this agreement. And unless you do something that's really nefarious or weird, they're happy to have you sell their stuff. So one is this one's fastest. This is low risk for kind of both parties, because if you are an affiliate and you're promoting it, like, they don't have to pay you until after you make a sale. Now for you, you also don't get capped. And so if you can make a ton of sales and you feel like you're being undervalued, then you just get to prove that you are actually good at promoting and that your audience is actually a good fit for whatever that product is. But from a value perspective, so I call it exit value, affiliate revenue streams are not typically that valuable. So they will contribute to the sellability of a company, but the majority of that value would come in the terms of a multiple of the cash flow that you're receiving as an affiliate, multiplied or discounted by how reliable the business that you're doing business with is. And so if I'm an affiliate of the US government, you know what I mean, and I recruit people for the military, then I probably can say that my business model is sound, the US government's not gonna go away. I'm not getting, notwithstanding, theories and whatnot. All right, but by and large, it's to be a trustworthy third party. On the flip side, if I have some info thing that is going to disappear tomorrow because of some arbitrage opportunity that's your business opportunity, then this is going to be basically have no value, because that business that underlies that cash flow has no value. All right, and so we're moving along here. So this is the lowest value, probably middle work, lowish risk for you. All right, the next is you've got sponsorships. So sponsorships is where someone pays you first. All right, so you receive cash and then you make the endorsement. And so usually this is in two forms. You advertise to your audience, and the reason I say advertise rather than here it's sell, here you only get paid after people buy. With sponsorships, you get paid first. And so that means that you are advertising. You're a traffic source for the business. And so you will get paid as a traffic source, typically based on CPMs, meaning cost per 1,000 impressions that you can have in terms of views to an audience. Now, these sponsorships come in the form of you posting stuff to your audience, which for them, they see this as free traffic. They're technically paying for it, but you're monetizing the traffic that you have. The other way, which is the more scalable way, is something called whitelisting, which is basically them taking whatever your posts are and then running them as ads. And so let's say I have a 1 million person audience, I make a post and only 200,000 people see it. And as most content creators would do, you wouldn't want to post over and over again about that thing, because it would kind of be like, oh, this guy's just promoting this thing over and over again. It wouldn't feel good, right? And so you might make a post or two every so often to not interrupt the value that you're providing to your audience too much. And so the way to solve this really for both parties is you make an advertisement saying, hey, I just partnered with so-and-so, their thing is awesome, I've actually been using it for years, finally came to an agreement, I think you guys might like it, check it out, right? And so that whitelisting then allows them to blast it to people way outside of your audience. I like this a lot as a win-win, because the business pays money to advertise your brand. So they make you bigger and they're spending money to advertise you. But at the same time, they get higher conversion rate because you're probably better on camera, you're better spoken, and you already have a certain amount of warm audience that recognize you, at least your face or your mannerisms, so you convert at a higher percentage. So the business makes money, you grow your brand. This is a really nice partnership. Now, these deals, sponsorships, are harder to come by than affiliate deals, because most affiliate companies just have a program, an influence program, affiliate program, and you just sign up on the standard terms. Sponsorships tend to be more a la carte, depending on the size of the influencer relative to the size of the company. And so, for extreme examples, if you're a huge influencer and there's a tiny company, you'll be able to get an amazing sponsorship deal. If it's a huge company like Nike and you're a small influencer, you might not get any deal and you still wear their stuff. And so it's really the balance between who has how much leverage in the negotiation. Which brings us to the third one, which is partnerships. All right. Now, as we move along here, sponsorships also don't have, kind of like affiliates, huge exit value. The only place that sponsorships really become exitable value for a business is if you have a true media company. Now, if you're a personal brand, it's really tough to exit your personal brand. But if I have an army of influencers and I negotiate deals through my network and say, hey, Pabst Blue Ribbon or Budweiser, whatever. I have 1,000 influencers that fit your ideal profile for customers, and I'll negotiate an umbrella deal, and then all of them are forced because you have with them to promote your stuff. Now you have a media company, which is very similar to a talent agency, slightly different, but has a lot of similarities. And so then that sponsorship revenue is really the main revenue of your business, which is that you sell traffic at a discount, right? But for the influencer individually, these two things, very hard to sell. Not really sellable, not much. Now, once we get into this side, these deals get harder and harder to do, and you do fewer and fewer of them as you go down this line. So a partnership can either be a minority deal or a majority deal. Again, if you're going to go partner with a company and you're huge and they're tiny, then it might be a majority deal. If they're huge and you're tiny relative to them, then it might be a minority deal, meaning you're not going to get all of the company. And that can range from 0.01% of the business all the way to you getting 99% of the business in terms of the range. And so anything that you can imagine in terms of economics here is going to be negotiable. But some of the things that I would consider here is performance, which is, this is again for both parties. You can have equity as the form of compensation rather than necessarily cash. And you say, hey, if I bring you an extra 1,000 customers, I get 1% per 1,000 customers that I bring you to the platform or whatever. And then you put a cap on that at some point where you say up to 10%. Great. And so that way it's a little bit balanced for you and for the business. Now, one of the considerations that you have to have if you were the content creator or the influencer is that the association that you make with their brand is permanent. As soon as you make that public declaration, you transfer all of that goodwill, you transfer that association to them. And so if you are going to do a deal like this, my recommendation is that you want to have at least something up front. So no matter what for doing this deal, you get some amount of this equity up front, and then some percentage that's based on performance. Now, one of the last components that I'll say, and there's obviously a lot of ways that you can do deals, but these are just the things that I think through, is time. And so somebody who's on the business owner side is like, well, I don't want you to just make one association. I want you to keep doing this for a long period of time. And so they can take some of this equity that they want to give you and say, all right, I'm going to give you, 25% of your equity up front. I'm going to give you 25% based on performance, and I'm going to give you 50% over time. And so I want you to promote for the next 4 years. And if for some reason something happens, then you're not going to get that vesting because we had some sort of breakup, right? And so whenever I think through these terms, I just like to think through all the W's, which is who, what, where, when, why, how, right? Which is, okay, I want you to post. And if you're the content creator, you should be asking that same thing, which is, how much do you want me to post, right? And about what? And you have to take into consideration that you have to keep building your brand, right? And so you don't want to just be like all of a sudden some shill, like that's not good. You want to tastefully be able to integrate that promotion into the content that you have. And so you have to say, okay, well, I think the best way for us to do this is for me to, put your links in my bio, and I'll put it up for 1 week of the month, and I will make one long form thing that mentions it, and 5 short form things via posts or stories. And then when you define that, and the reason this is so important is that you define that stuff up front so that it's just very clear. Don't just say like, I will promote the business and whatnot, because it just doesn't work as well. And you might say, I will also record ads once a month that you can then use for whitelisting. And so all of these things, and this is where this gets more nuanced in deal making, is you can be a partner and still have affiliate revenue. You can be a partner and still get paid from a sponsorship perspective. And so these things are not mutually exclusive. But like you might have a primarily sponsorship deal with some element of equity. But I will say on a personal level, the more money you have right now, the more you want to lean this way, because the equity, the sponsorship cash that you choose to take, you do at the expense of equity. And if you believe in the product and you believe that the company is exitable in the future, then in my opinion, it makes sense to delay it for the little bit longer run. But this takes on more risk, because here you get paid today no matter what. Here, you might not ever get paid if the company doesn't sell. And so by taking on more risk, you want to make sure that you're getting a disproportionate reward in the form of stock shares, options, equity, and things like that. All right. And so as we're walking through this and you're thinking, okay, how can I monetize my brand? It's like, okay, the first level, I can do affiliates and just promote other people's stuff and get paid for it. The next level, I can be a media source for them. I can be traffic for them via sponsorship, right? These are a little bit more nuanced deals. Taking another step, I can actually partner with the brand and say, hey, I want to own 1%, 5%, 10%, 50%, depending on how big you are and how big your audience is. And then finally, you can start your own brand. And when I say brand, I say that all inclusive in terms of product and brand. And when you do this, you can either white label, which means you go to somebody who manufactures stuff already and say, can you slap my logo on it? Which is an option. And the other option is that you do custom formulations. I'll just say custom stuff. All right. And so if I were selling supplements, for example, I might go to a company that already has a product that's done, and I just say, hey, I want to slap my label on it. On the custom version of this, it's like, hey, I want this gram of this, we're going to test out flavors together, and we're going to put it together and make a custom product that no one else has. Same things works with merchandise. So if you said, hey, I want to get a white t-shirt, and you just try 6 different white t-shirts that people have off the shelf that are manufacturers, they say, okay, just slap my logo on it, let's go. Or you say, hey, what are the different fabrics? What are the different materials that I can put together? These are the cuts that I want to look at. This is how I want it to fit, right? That becomes more custom. And so white label is faster, and
easier from a speed perspective, but usually, me personally, I prefer to do custom stuff because I don't like anyone else being able to sell something that's identical to me and be able to have any kind of pricing power over what I have. Because the moment that people find out that you just have a generic product that you slap a label on, it's not a good look, right? And so, again, I don't think there's anything, like I'll be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with doing white label. I just think that if we were to put this on this sphere, like white label would be here and custom would be here. But if you're going to take the risk on starting your own brand, I might as well get all the benefits of doing it. But this costs more money. White label tends to cost less because you don't have to get custom templates, custom forms, and pay and incur all those costs. Because someone else, their whole business is based around doing this for other people, right? Now, the difference here is that for all of these situations, you're going to promote stuff that already exists. Here, you're starting the thing from ground zero, which means that you're on the other side of the table now. You start with 100% equity, and then you start paying people this way, down the line. And so if you are an influencer, you have an audience, or you're a business owner and you're trying to make deals with influencers, this is how I think through this. And I try and see there are elements that you can borrow from each of these kind of verticals to tweak the deal to make it right for everyone. And so I think about it in terms of what's the exit value, what cash is going to be going in or out of the business, how much work is the person going to do, and then how much risk am I or are they exposed to. And by balancing those four things, you can usually navigate along this continuum to find the right part, the right deal that's right for you and the product.
As a bonus, I want to take you behind the scenes to what I've just learned with my personal brand so you can make more money and grow your business.
I made 35,000 posts over 40 months and grew a 7.8 million person audience. And 3 weeks ago, I made 6 big shifts in my content. And I want to show you behind the scenes what we found from those 6 big shifts with screenshots of the data so that you can use this to make more money in your business and whatever you promote. And so the first was we went from edutainment to education. So instead of being kind of halfway through to all the way all in on education. Now that had downstream impacts in terms of how we package, how we title things, even the number of special effects we have. And the purpose of education, as I see it, is to change behavior. And so my point is with this video, once I show you the data of what's happened since that change, since we made these 6 shifts, that hopefully, or hopefully not, we'll see what you decide to do, but it will change how you make content to make more money. So number 1 is edutainment to education. Number 2 is going from for us to for you. Now when I say for us, what ended up happening with the mistakes I made was that, unknowingly, was that I would be like, team, what do you guys think about content? And so they'd be like, hey, we should make a video on this. Hey, we should make a video on this. And so what ended up happening is I started making videos for my team, not my ideal customer, a business owner. And so I actually had a friend come into town and say, hey, you know, it's weird. I actually haven't been paying attention to your content. He does about 10 million bucks a year. And I was like, he's like, well, I guess I'm not really your avatar. I was like, whoa. I was like, you are 100% my avatar. What's going on? And so as soon as I realized that, I was like, oh man. He's like, it just didn't feel as relevant to me. And so I was making stuff for my team rather than my avatar. And so if you are somebody who makes content, something to be mindful of is your team might not be the type of people you're trying to make content for. So just something interesting for me. So I went from for us, our team, to for you, viewer, for business owners. Number 3, we went from wide to narrow. So fitness, relationships, etc. Those are wider topics. More people are in a relationship, more people eat food, more people trying to lose weight, compared to only 9% of people are business owners. And so we went much narrower on the topic of like, I'm just talking about business because that's what I love talking about too, as a side note. And so it turns out business owners like it more when I talk about business, and I like it more as a business owner. So everybody wins, at least for me. Number 4 is we went from views to revenue. Now this is key. So when you just have views as a metric, then you kind of do chase wider because it was the only real metric we were tracking. And we didn't really have anything better at the time, and that's what we focused on. Since then, we've transitioned to ad revenue. Here's why. Ad revenue takes into account views, but it has a second metric that's paired with it, which is RPMs, which is revenue per 1,000 eyeballs. So if YouTube pays lots of money for the eyeball, then it means they're more valuable. And if they're more valuable to the advertiser, they're more valuable to me. And so my idea here is that I want to make sure that we're showing our videos to the right people, or rather that the right people are watching. Now, once we can control for that, and we stay or keep our RPMs and the amount that advertisers are willing to pay for these eyeballs high, then we get as many views as we can. And as a total pro tip for business stuff in general, paired KPIs works exceptionally well. So if you're a customer success, you want the speed of resolution, but you also want a quality metric. If you had a company that did cleaning, it'd be the same thing. You pair reviews from customers with the number of cleans per day. And so you like to have both edges so that you can control for both sides. And you should do that with any department you can. Now, so I said number 4 was views to ad revenue as our primary metric that we were optimizing for. So we no longer cared, this one had a lot of views. We don't care about that. It's just, do we have as many views with the right people? Number 5 is we went from emphasizing shorts to emphasizing longs. We saw that longs got the best people, and the whole thesis around shorts creates longs viewers. We actually haven't seen any evidence that supports that. People watch shorts want more shorts, people want more longs, which doesn't necessarily mean that people from a different platform don't watch you shorts on TikTok and then they're a long form YouTube watcher and then watch your stuff on YouTube that long. But usually people who watch long form stuff on YouTube watch long form stuff on YouTube. People who watch short form on YouTube watch short form. Some people watch both, but most of the time people kind of have consumption preferences, and they're not going to change their preferences for you. They just might watch you in a different place where that consumption preference is what you make. And so we found that, and we found that the longs are the things that actually drove the most applications for acquisition.com and the most book sales and the most opt-ins. So that's what we're making more of. And number 6 was assuming more versus assuming nothing. Meaning, I made videos like the Alex Hormozi diet. I made the Alex Hormozi vlog, the Hormozis, things like that. Those assume that somebody who doesn't know me will want to care about whoever the hell Alex Hormozi is. which I don't think is that reasonable. Like, I don't think they would want that, because who cares about this random dude? And so it's assuming nothing. Now that has changes in terms of what we're making. So there's no assumptions. For example, like WeOwnAcquisition.com, we have portfolio businesses. I introduce myself because if you don't know who I am, this might be the first video you see of me. And so if I stopped doing that for a while, because I kind of went into this mindset that everyone knew. Now, obviously that's dumb. Way more people don't know me than know me. But you kind of fall into this trap of assuming you're talking to your warm audience rather than what you're making the content for, which is people who've never met you before. And so keeping that top of mind, which is that we want to make sure that we welcome everyone and that we don't have inside jokes that only people who are on the inside feel it, because then all it does is it excludes people that are new. And like what you want to do is bring more people into your world anyways, especially if they're business owners from it. And so there's the 6 changes that we made in our content, and so we've gone all in on that concept, and so we've done a lot of rapid iteration. But let me tell you the data that's happened since. So right off the bat, RPMs, meaning the revenue per 1,000 viewers, went up by 68%. So like when you think, man, I don't feel like I can, like what my content is about, like it doesn't change anything. Well, it sure as hell did for us. When I talk about deep business stuff, when I talk about reducing churn, when I talk about increasing number of times, like ways to get someone to buy more times, when I talk about how we scaled a 40-person sales team and all the steps that we did in order to do that in a real case study in a real business, when I talk about how you can deconstruct and reconstruct a brand, these are deeper business concepts. And guess what? Business owners watch them. And guess what? Those eyeballs are more valuable. 68%, and we're only gonna get better at it. And so for us, boom, that meant that us changing our topics got the right people to watch the videos. Checkbox 1. And so you can see by the video title, when we had educational versus kind of wide, or business education versus wider topics, the wider topics in general had way lower RPMs. You can see that with the light blue, whereas the purple is more money making, more business, more sales, more retention, real business tactics that grow companies. And those, unsurprisingly, were way higher in average RPM. Some of them even higher than that. So the next big change, and I see this as anecdotal, is that 25% more comments per view. And so I see that as an engagement metric, that we had way more people saying, wow, this is good, or this is great, or I miss this style of content. That's actually a really common thing. And I will say this is my detriment. I should have seen that more business owners were telling us in the comments what they wanted. And honestly, I just wasn't listening. And that's on me. I was like, well, you're gonna lose some people as you make more high production stuff, that's okay. But with the return to hardcore business education in terms of the content that we're making, the response has been overwhelming, that so many people were like, I'm coming back to all your content, this has been great, this is what I came here for, and so I'm stoked about that. And so we have 25% more people who are doing that, we have more shares, negligible, and slightly fewer likes, which again, whatever. But for me, I would rate comments and shares as higher. And so overall, we had higher engagement from these videos, even though they were narrower topics, which to me is more good for fewer people than a little bit of good for a lot of people, which is where I want to be in terms of what I want to serve, or who I want to serve. So the next big change is that despite, and this is a key point, despite having fewer absolute views per long form video, we're actually getting more long form views overall across the channel. So we're up almost 30%, 29.56%, than our 6 weeks average before that from these deeper educational videos. Now, realistically, that's a function of one main thing, in my opinion. That's because the education stuff actually requires far less post editing. And I can make more education stuff because this is what I do every day. And so we can actually create more content, which I'm stoked about. And I think, hopefully business owners are too. And so we actually get more overall views with the right people because we don't have nearly as much hi-fi post-production whiz bangs, which is what most of my audience who was trying to learn stuff rather than be entertained was happy about. All right, this next one is very surprising, to me at least. So our subscriber conversion increased by 24.6%. And so that means that we've actually, even though, again, we had slightly lower absolute views, more long form views, that we actually increased the absolute number of subscribers per week since doing this. So I was very comfortable with all of these metrics tanking. I honestly expected that because I was like, all right, well, we're gonna have way fewer views, but it's gonna be the right people. But because 25% more people who watch subscribe, even though we get fewer views, our actual subscriber growth has grown, which is crazy in an absolute metric way. So this was an unexpected outcome for me and has just reinforced that this was the right decision for the audience that I want, which is business owners. The next thing is okay, well, if you're getting fewer views, how is that gonna translate to opt-ins? Because I'm a business owner, that's what I care about. I care about people who are trying to become portfolio companies, come to a workshop, whatever. And so it turns out that we have 26% more opt-ins per week since making this change. And so this is both incredibly surprising and also incredibly duh. And I say this because saying, hey, I'm gonna make business owner stuff to get more business owners, duh. But at the same time, I'll say this, just me kind of commenting on a lot of the educators that are in the space, they tend to start moving more and more broad, more and more wide, more and more entertainment-y, more and more topics that they don't necessarily have expertise on because they seek the views. Whether they say it or not, they don't want to say they're like saying cash, so they still kind of count their likes. And so I think if you can just absolutely get your logic head on, which is tough because sometimes it's tough to go away from those vanity metrics. But I care about the bottom line, and so the right people were seeing it, and the right people were taking action. And so we, in the business sense, saw growth from this in a big way, and this is just like 3 weeks in, 4 weeks into this kind of execution all in on the strategy, and this will compound. And so if you don't know, I have 2 best-selling books on Amazon. They're still like number 1 and number 2 in marketing and sales, and they've been there for like number 1 and number 2 for 2 years or 3 years, whatever, how they've been out. So they're pretty strong. And so we sell books every month no matter what. But what was crazy to me was to see this jump in book sales that happened as we're like, think about this. We're getting fewer views, but more sales by a lot, like 2x the sales, twice, not like 20%, twice the sales of books that I have. And mind you, by the way, if you're like, hey, I'm poor, I get it. My books are free too. They're like, you can go to acquisition.com and you get the video course, all my stuff for free. You don't have to opt in. And you can go on my podcast and you can listen to the audiobook for free. All right, like the stuff's free. This isn't how I make my money, but it's a really good leading indicator for me of the quality of traffic. Now, if you want to get a physical copy, yes, there's printing costs and there's shipping costs, so yeah, you pay some bucks. But if you're dead broke poor, you can use the free stuff. The point is that this attracted the right people who want, because if I make a fitness meals video, guess what those people don't care about? Getting leads and making offers. Kind of sounds obvious when you think about it. When I make a, hey, this is how I work with Layla, my wife, maybe you get somebody who's like, what about the married entrepreneurs? Like, well, only 9% of people are business owners. And then of that 9%, how many of them are married to their partner? Percentage. Versus just talking about business stuff, business people want to get more leads, make more offers, make more money. And so that's what my books are about. And so lo and behold, more of those people bought. Now, I want to be super clear. I want to show these two keynotes here. So there are some keynotes that will be both deep and wide. And as a content creator slash business owner slash investor slash husband slash human being, anyway, boy big, sometimes you hit it out of the park and you actually get both. So my highest revenue per view video also happens to be my most viewed video. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a lot of views, the RPMs are low. No, not at all. You can get a video that applies to all business owners and it will get a lot of views. And the CPMs and the RPMs will be high. The branding video is the same thing. Now it's very recent. It's new and it continues to climb up. And both of these are very conceptual business concepts that all business owners can benefit from. And so if I talk about leverage, almost all businesses need to understand strategy and leverage. It applies, it's a huge amount of value to business owners. Understanding brand, tremendous value to any business. Now, on the other hand, you can also make, and we call these keynotes, but like longer form, either whiteboard presentations or like a presentation that I put a lot of time into. Some of them are going to be deeper and less wide, and that's okay. Like if I talk about scaling a 40-person sales team, if you have an e-commerce store, it doesn't affect you. But leverage and brand would affect you whether you had the 40-person sales team or the e-commerce company or a software company or an app or whatever. And so again, the scaling 40-person sales team still super valuable, but it's just going to be only valuable to 1/3 of the business owner audience that I might be able to, who might want to watch this. Same thing with the video made about 10xing your business overnight by using mega influencers. Basically showing how to get a Mr. Beast, a Logan Paul, a Rock to partner with, a Conor McGregor, a Huda Beauty, a Taylor Swift to partner with to 10x your business. Now, if you're a business like a local business, the likelihood that they're going to partner with you is really low, right? And so it doesn't really make sense for that particular business. Now, you could use that on a micro scale, but it might just not have as much transference. If you have an e-commerce brand that's national, it might make a ton of sense. But again, it's going to have a subsegment of already a 9% slice of the population that it would be deeply valuable to, though. And so that's the thing is that I have to think about, like, I'm okay with a video that gets 10,000 views instead of 400,000 views. If 10,000 of those people are $10 million plus business owners, it's like, here's how I packaged my company in order to sell it. I have a video on my channel that walks through 46 minutes of the decision-making process I use to determine to sell my business. Guess who that applies to? Basically no one, unless you actually have a lot of money and you already have a business asset that's $5 million in profit or more. And so, let's see, 9% of businesses, it's like 0.1% do $10 million a year of businesses. So there's like no one who that actually applies to, except for those people who are like, this thing was amazing, this changed my life. And I had a bunch of people after I posted that I know that were big 20, 30, $40 million a year business owners who watched me like, this is insane, I can't believe you gave this out. I'm like, believe it, because guess what? No one else is gonna watch it. And so I will say this is me giving you like a little hat tip for consumers.
Fucking
if you're
hell,
a business
man.
owner, I would not gauge views as whether the video is good or not. It just shows how relevant it is to how many people. And so if you're an e-commerce person, I have some videos in here about how to use offers for e-commerce. That's just already going to be a slice of a slice, but it'd be super applicable for you. And so I'm okay with very small views as long as the quality gives value and provides a result in a clear way for the viewer. And so I define education as changing behavior. So if I can help them change their behavior in a way that makes them more money, ideally they'll associate that money they made, that value they made, with us at acquisition.com. And so that's the whole goal of this stuff. And for the creators out there, for those of you guys who are making content in your business, I'll give you this frame that I started out with that helped me a lot, which is, when I posted my first, I started at 0 on every platform, to be very clear. Like, it wasn't like, I was Taylor Swift and I came on TikTok, yay, right? It wasn't like that. When I started on YouTube, I had no subscribers. And the first videos I posted got like 100 views, right? But I thought to myself, I was like, man, if I would probably go across town to speak to a 100-person audience for lunch, and I'd have no problem with that. And so the idea that I had 100 people I was like, that's not bad. What do you think there's 10 people? I'm like, well, I would talk to a 10 person. I mean, I used to do this for years. I would do a lunch and learn and see if I could sell some weight loss. You know what I mean? Like, I was willing to do that anyways. And so there's this, it's literally just because of comparison that people feel bad about their social media content, not because inherently the numbers don't make sense. And the crazy thing about this, and I just want to reemphasize, is it's free. It's free. The platforms distribute your content for free. These are people that would never find out about you, and they find out about you for free. Like, take that in for a second. So the leverage on free distribution is infinite. And so if you get 1,000 people over a month who see your thing, it's 1,000 people. It's not nothing. And so I try to make sure that I focus on that concept of like, oh man, my average for the channel is 400,000. We got a 50,000 view video. 50,000? My God, I speak at conferences with 1,000 people. It's 50 times that. Not bad. And those people, I got to have a really, really curated experience, increase the value per second, absolutely crush as much value as I possibly could in that time period. And so I'll make one last note on the deep versus wide content, is that I get so many DMs and like Slack messages even from our portfolio company founders who are like, dude, that last video was so sick. And I hadn't had that in a minute for probably the 6 months we went a little bit wider with our content. And it became so reinforcing for me, even though like, what's the number of people? I don't know, 50 people maybe messaged me being like, dude, that new content, like your new content style, or going back, like the new old content of more whiteboard, more deep business tactics, like it's so great, my team's watching it again. That like fills me up, because that's why I made the stuff to begin with, was the stuff that I didn't have when I was coming up that I wish someone had taught me. And then I had to just find out through trial and error. And so that's why we make this stuff. But the views weren't high. But for me, like, I'm here for business owners. And I already know there's only 9% of people are business owners, and that's okay. I'm here for you guys. All right, so here's what we're doing next with this data. All right, so we had our hypothesis, we looked at or do. And for those of you who are worried, because I can already hear the thoughts that are coming up, so let me just address those right now. I see you. I'm going to lose retention if I introduce myself. Okay, let's play the equal opposite. Would you rather fewer people know who you are, or more people who have no clue? Because on one hand, we have some people who know you, and on the other hand, we have lots of people who also don't know you. So you're in the exact same position you were before. 2, well, aren't people going to get sick of this? You're going to keep saying your name every time or keep introducing yourself? Well, from what I can tell, warm people like the reminders, and cold people need the introduction. And as a total side note, this is a fun little experiment for everyone here. You can run this when you leave here.